The tomato is a Native American fruit or plant that was first discovered among maize and corn crops with the Inca Indians as a wild weed, and its interest was very popular, and they would take the plant and deliver it throughout the United States and even ship it over countries. And since that time, of course, there's been all kinds of names given to the tomato: bad egg, love apple, and it just had its ups and downs. But it wasn't until the Heinz industry were able to put the tomatoes in a can that the popularity caught on. So it's interesting how a weed, a native weed, grew into one of the most popular crops grown today by Americans. And it's also interesting to know, since that time, there's been over 4,000 introduced or named varieties of tomatoes. And it's thought that over 1,700 of those are heirlooms. And of course, that's what we're focusing on this year. And we just tried our hand at growing 4 different types of heirloom tomatoes, not knowing how they would even do in Oklahoma. And I'd like to show those to you at this time. The first one is called Olympic Flame, and it's in the literature and the reports that we got on it, it told us that it was really a beefsteak tomato. Well, none of the ones that we have grown have even come close to being the size of a beefsteak. It was one of our earlier producing ones, about 80 days, but all of these varieties are indeterminate tomatoes. So you can just see behind me the height of them. Some of them are already over 6 feet tall, and they just keep growing, and we've had to cage all of them. But this one is said to be crack resistant, which it has been. And when we say crack resistant, usually on the shoulders you'll see cracks from fluctuations of moisture in the ground. It's not what we consider a red tomato. Matter of fact, it doesn't even look ripe, but it actually is. And what it is, it's a marbling tomato, or a tomato that has red and yellow consistency. And we'll cut into it to kind of show you what that looks like. After it's cut into, the marbling, in my opinion, isn't really as noticeable on the inside as it is on the outside, again with the yellow and red. Still a pretty tasty tomato, but we're kind of disappointed in the size from what we were led to believe in the article. Now the next one is very interesting. It was actually first introduced in 1860 as white apple or snowball tomato. And then later on it was reintroduced as white beauty in 1975. Again, it's about 80 days from planting to harvest, and it truly is a white apple. Now or a white color, and as it gets a little bit overripe, it starts getting a pinkish cast to it. So you want to try to get them at this stage when it's a little bit more whiter color. And this one has a tendency for the stem to stick on the tomato, and you know, if you harvest them, go ahead and pull those off. It's kind of difficult to do, but they'll store better and they won't poke the other fruit. When you cut into it, it really is a pretty white color, and it just doesn't even look like a tomato. But personally, among most of these, it's one of my favorites. It's a little bit sweeter, it's got plenty of meat inside it, and a pretty good sized tomato. Now some of these, let me turn over one and kind of show you. We're getting some cat-facing problems. It's not really characteristic of this tomato, although some of the earlier ones were deformed on the bottom a little bit more, like this. And a lot of your tomatoes are probably having this appearance in it. It's nothing but scar tissue caused from what is called cat tissue or cat-facing. And it's the appearance of it that gives it that name. But what causes it, back in the spring when our tomatoes were being set, we had some temperatures that fall below 50 degrees. And anything that damages the pistil of the flower causes it to be deformed like that. So the cool temperatures, also excessive moisture. Then if we go from excessive moisture to dry conditions, it will also cause it. Poor pollination, sometimes herbicide damage, over-fertilizing can do it. So there's several things that can cause it. Now it doesn't hurt the tomato, you can just cut that out and it's still very tasty. So this is white beauty, as it's called now. And one thing about it too, the plant really isn't very disease resistant, although we've still had pretty good luck with ours because we've tried to keep up with sanitation practices. Now the next one is actually an Italian heirloom tomato called Genovese, and it's really the earliest producing one we had at about 78 days. its characteristics are with the deep lobes that you'll notice here. And one thing we've noticed too is that it's very soft skinned, so it bruises very easily, and you want to take it in and use it right away. And remember, on any of the tomatoes, it's best to let them ripen on the vine and then take them inside, or if you're not sure they're ripe, leave them at room temperature and let them ripen there before you ever put them in the refrigerator to keep them. If you put them in before they ripen in the refrigerator, that will kill the ripening process. And let me cut into one of these and show you what it looks like. And they just talked about the taste of this one in the catalog, and I'm not real impressed with the taste, although they say it makes good paste, tomato paste or tomato sauce. But again, it has an interesting shape that's quite a conversation piece. Now, the biggest tomato out of our entire group is called Big Rainbow. It's also the longest producing one. It likes cooler temperatures, and so in that aspect, there's hardly any cap facing on it. This one is basically a growth crack because the tomato is so big. It takes about 102 days to produce these. Again, some of the records show that they can grow up to 2 pounds in size, and this one was first introduced out of Polk City, Minnesota, and it's a popular one up in the northern part of the United States. Again, it has good resistance to disease, but we have found that this one and the Costa Luto Genovese, the popularity among our birds have been quite favorite too. We have gotten some huge tomatoes, and the birds have gone in and landed on our cages and pecked the meat right out of them. So that's one of our favorites. And the reason it gets a name, Big Rainbow, is the shoulders are a greenish color at first, turning yellow, but then it goes to an orange color and then red on the bottom. So it's 3 stages to give it that rainbow appearance. And let me cut into one right here that's a little bit more ripe to show you the marbling effect. Again, it's a yellow red color, and it truly does have the marbling effect inside, where the other Olympic flame wasn't quite as noticeable. Now, if you're interested in how some of these varieties have existed over hundreds of years, it's usually through seed companies that have tried to keep the seed and keep them from year after year. And again, they're open pollinated, so it's easy to do. So it's going to be hard to find some of these at your garden center. So let me show you some of the seed catalogs that we've used in trying to find these heirloom varieties, and not only tomatoes but other types. This one is Territorial Seed Company, and it's out of Oregon. We also have Southern Exposure Seed Exchange out of Virginia, and you'll have to bear with me, it's kind of windy today. Shepherd's Garden Seed, and this one is out of Connecticut. Nichols Garden Nursery, it's out of Oregon also. And then here's one that's specifically for tomatoes called Tomato Grower Supply, and it's out of Fort Myers, Florida. So again, a lot of these catalogs you may get, if not, they're easy to get access to find these types of things. But also collecting tomato heirlooms is up to people like yourselves.